In this lesson, we're going to explore basic EBS functionality. We're going to first provision an EBS disk, attach it to an instance, write some data and read that data back out from the disk, detach it from the instance, reattach it, snapshot it, and then use that snapshot to build a new instance. It's required that you first do the spinning up first EC2 server lab, as well as review the templatizing servers with AMI's presentation. It's also highly suggested that you review the EC2 disk options presentations, as well as have a basic understanding of how disks work in Linux. Let's go ahead and log into the AWS console and choose EC2 under Compute and Networking. The first thing we need to do is determine which availability zone our running instance is in. This instance was created in the SSHing into Servers lab. Let's go ahead and click on that instance. And here we see that my first server from our first lab is running. We can see that it's running in the zone US East 1B. Again, you may be in a different zone than I am, so choose whichever zone is appropriate for you and remember it. I know that I'm in 1B. I'm going to go over to Elastic Block Store here on the left and choose Volumes. So I can see here that I only have a single 8 gig volume that was used by my first server. Let's now create a brand new volume. For the volume type, we have two options, standard or provisioned IOPS. Provisioned IOPS offer higher throughput, but we don't need that, so let's just use standard. In our case, 100 gigs is probably overkill, so let's go with 10 gigabytes. I can specify up to 1 terabyte. Note, you don't want to set this too small, because if you do, this is going to be used as the root volume for our server, and it needs at least about 8 gigabytes or so of space. The availability zone, let's again choose US East 1B, in my case. Again, your case, you might have a different availability zone that your first server was put into. For snapshot, I can see here that there are a lot of different snapshots that Amazon provides. We're going to want an empty raw disk, and so will you in most cases, so leave no snapshot as the option there. Because this was such a small volume that I just provisioned, you can see that it's already available for me to use. Let's go ahead and click on just this volume and right-click and select Attach Volume from the options. Amazon automatically loads all the instances that I have in US 1B, and here you can see that my first server is the only instance we have. The device mount point is the physical mapping of the disk. Let's just go ahead and leave that at /dev/SDF and click Yes, Attach. Excellent. So this 10 gigabyte volume that we just provisioned is now attached to my EC2 instance. For the rest of the setup, we need to actually log into the instance itself. But first, I'm going to show you something interesting. If I click EC2 Dashboard and click Running Instance to get back into my instance, you'll see that in my case, I've rebooted my instance. Here you see that I've got -144 as the new DNS. In order to SSH into this, I'm going to have to use that new DNS to access it. So let's copy my new DNS out. Again, if you didn't reboot your instance, you're probably not going to see this problem. I'm going to SSH-I production.pem ec2-user at and my new instance domain. Again, from SSH's perspective, this looks like a brand new host, so I'm again going to get this key warning, and after I type yes, it will be added to my keychain. Excellent. For the rest of the setup, we're going to need to review the file 0306 mount-ebs-commands.txt, which should be in your files folder. The first thing we have to do is format this disk. So I'm going to copy out this command to format it as ext3, and I'm going to paste that command back in my server. Here you can see that it's formatting my disk. And when this is done, it'll report back to me that it's finished. Excellent. Next up, we need to make a directory to mount this disk at. This is going to be the logical mount point. Let's go ahead and do that. And we're going to mount our logical disk at that physical location. Perfect. So now, we should be able to verify that we can see this disk with the df command. It's exactly what we were hoping to see. We've now got a disk of 10 gigabytes mounted at this location, mount new disk. Let's go ahead and create a file on mount new disk, and let's just call it Kilroy was here. To do that in Linux, you can simply type touch mount new disk Kilroy-was-here, or rather sudo touch that command. Excellent. Now let's list that file out with an ls command. ls-la mount new disk Kilroy was here. And boom, I can see that I've created a 0-byte file at that location. This all looks fantastic. Let's go ahead and unmount our disk and remount it. Now note, from the command line, you can unmount the disk first. This is actually the more polite way to mount the disk from Linux. Inside of AWS, I could simply come over here and do a force unmount inside of volumes. I can go to this disk and do a force detach. But this could be problematic if you had bytes that were being written to that disk. It's always better to follow this procedure and first do a sudo umount the location of the disk itself, unmount it from there, as well as its physical location, dev sdf, and it says it's not mounted. So now we can go ahead and go into volumes and choose our disk and do a detach volume. Here I'm going to go ahead and detach the volume. And if I refresh a couple times up here, I should see its state go to available. And boom, we see that that volume is again available. Here again, I can right-click on that row and attach the volume back to my server. And pushing yes, attach. So let's now go back and create an AMI from a running instance. Click on EC2 dashboard, running instances, and let's click on the running instance that we have, and right-click and select Create Image, EBS AMI. And from here, let's give it the name of first image and a description of image from my running instance. Let's leave all else as shown and push yes, create. Excellent. Now we're creating an image from this instance. Let's take a look at its progress. If we go into Images, AMIs, right here, you're going to see that first image is being created. Let's go ahead and refresh a couple times until this image is finished. Again, what we created here is only the boot volume. This is not going to include the EBS volume that we created at that separate mount point. And finally, we're in status available. Note that it could take you about 4 or 5 minutes to get there. One important thing to note here is that the visibility is set to private. Nobody's going to be able to launch this AMI unless I change that. Now let's go ahead and create a second server from this AMI. Let's go up to EC2 dashboard, push launch instance, choose the classic wizard, and this time, instead of using Amazon Linux AMI, let's use my AMIs. And here you can see that my first image is made available to us. Let's choose that. Let's go ahead and use all the defaults on this page and this page as well. And here you can see that the EBS volume is mounted along with it. Let's go ahead and push continue and give this second server a name of second server from AMI and push continue. Let's choose the existing production key pair. And let's instead choose my first server security group and push continue and push launch. Now let's click on view your instances on the instances page. And here let's choose running instances and keep refreshing until we see that second machine come up. Excellent. Now we've got a machine running. Let's go ahead and choose its row. And let's line up SSH command so that we can get into the machine. Let's choose the DNS, the public DNS that was selected for that machine, and copy that to our clipboard. Let's go over to our SSH client and get an SSH command ready. SSH-I production.pem ec2-user @ and paste in the DNS. Let's not push enter yet because I see that we're still waiting on this machine to initialize. Let's go ahead and push refresh a couple times. Excellent. Now we see that we've got 2 out of 2 checks passed. And let's push enter in our SSH client. Let's go ahead and type yes to add this key to our keychain. And boom, we can see that we're on the other machine. The costs for most of this exercise fall under the free tier for EBS, which allows 30 gig of free disk indefinitely. Again, please make sure that this is still the case as of this lesson while you're viewing it. Another important thing to note here is that we actually spun up 2 instances. That second instance is going to come at cost. So let's go ahead and kill it now. Choose EC2 dashboard, push running instances, identify the second server that you spun up, select it, and from actions, let's choose terminate to completely kill the instance. Again, you can see why names come in so handy. If we had not put a name in here, we'd be very confused as to which server we wanted to kill. I'd invite you now to explore your instance, explore your EBS volume. Feel free to poke around. You can try to create another EBS volume, attach it to the same instance. You can try to stripe or RAID 0 the disks together. You can try to create another EC2 instance, and you can write data to the EBS volume, detach it from the first EC2, reattach it to the second, and verify the data is still there. Before we go on, let's follow one of the procedures that we laid out for ourselves, cleaning up after ourselves. Let's first remove all the empty volumes, snapshots, and AMIs that we created before. Here you can see that we have our snapshot of the first server. Let's go ahead and first click into EC2 dashboard, click into our running instances, and verify that everything except my first server is dead. My first server is the only one that I see, which is great. Next, let's go into AMIs. Let's delete this AMI by selecting it and choosing deregister, pushing continue here. You may have to click refresh several times before you see this. No AMIs found. Next, let's go into snapshots and remove our snapshots. And let's actually go ahead and remove all 3. Selecting all and pushing delete. You may have less than I do, but just delete whatever's there. Next, let's go into volumes, and let's delete all of our available volumes, one at a time. And let's go into security groups, make sure we don't have any extra, and we do not. Perfect. I think we deleted everything we needed to from this exercise. In this lesson, we went through all these various exercises with EBS volumes.